Anibal and Olga were indeed lovers. He's the one who's lying, not her.
How long have you known this?
I found out soon after you both arrived in San Juan.
Kenyans, I want to take this opportunity as the Cabinet Secretary for Health to invite you to Kericho County on the 20th of October, where His Excellency the President shall be launching officially the universal health coverage. Come and witness over 4,000 community health promoters from across the county. They'll be showcasing what it is that we have been able to put together as a ministry. Welcome, Kenyans.
Abantu ba Mintombo Yamore.
Your favorite KBC station, Minto FM, is now at your doorstep. Enjoy the hottest KC music, informative and entertaining shows, and reliable news only on Minto FM. Tune in to Minto FM on 91.7 FM in Nyamira, Kisii, and its environs.
Minto FM, Enyakanga, Enyamanazi.
All right, and welcome back. So, what my discussion today is, we want to talk about what Raila Odinga said on Sunday during the 80th birthday of his elder brother, Oburu Odinga. He said he praised Kalonzo Musyoka, Wiper leader, and he said that he's a trustworthy person, he's a man of God, he stood with him all over the years. We all know what really Raila said over the weekend. That formed part of the discussion, part of yesterday and from Sunday. And yesterday, the spokesperson Dennis Onyango said and refuted that Raila did not mean that he endorsed Kalonzo Musyoka for the 2027 general election. Now that is forming a part of discussion this particular morning. So Raila U-turn on Kalonzo 2027 State House bid. That is the big U-turn. So Churchill, can we say it was, we all know that in politics nothing happens by accident. It's a well-calculated move and it happens. Why that sudden change? Or why that U-turn? As you answer that, the statement came from Raila Odinga, and the person who refuted the claim was Dennis Onyango. Take it away.
You got it right. Everything that happens in politics never just happens, and it's always well calculated strategically. The timings are always well done. And remember that politicians thrive on publicity, and every publicity gives political capital to every politician. And many times they make proclamations, public proclamations to elicit public debate. And ideally that's how they remain relevant. When you discuss them, you discuss what they say, it gives them a feeling of power. And so that's one of the things that even what declaration of what the former Prime Minister did is, he actually wanted to elicit debate and see how would Kenyans really take this, and also to project the fact that Kalonzo Musyoka, who is the former Vice President, is a person he holds dear. And if, to cast also doubts even on his supporters about where he is now, are there possibilities of his ambition? Okay, so somehow he's also giving an assurance to the support base of the former Vice President that, you know what, this is where your ambitions will be best achieved. And we have you at heart. And by saying that, he was giving that assurance. And you can see that the kind of response that emerged was like, it's an endorsement, all right? Which he actually did. The only issue is, he did the endorsement for which election? Is it 2027? Is it 2032? Is it 2037?
Okay.
So that's something that is pretty open. You know, he did specify which election. Of course, Kenyans took it that it's 2027, and that is what Dennis Onyango was trying to dispute. So it could be 2027, it could be 2032, it could be 2037. But the fact is, the declaration gave an assurance to the former vice president and his support base that in Azimio lies your interest and the best bet to your achievement of your vision. And if there is other possibility, because you see, there could be trade-offs that might be happening beyond what we could see. And that's also the other thing that we need to look at. What are the other invisible things that could have been happening that may have triggered this public proclamation?
Yes.
Could there have been talks on the opposite side on trying to entice the former vice president that, you know what, that side has no your interest, come this side. So it's a game of, it's a politics of game of, you got to know what are you pulling to ensure that you secure your support base for whatever reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the question is, why that sudden U-turn? And why Dennis Onyango? It all came from Raila Odinga.
Yeah.
No member of Wiper Party talked about it.
Yeah.
No member of Azimio talked about it. It came from Raila Odinga. Even Kalonzo Musyoka did not comment. Nobody, none of the leaders who were present in that function commented about it. It was Raila Odinga, and that was it. Only for Dennis Onyango yesterday to refute the claims that, hey, that is not what Raila Odinga said. Picking a candidate would only happen a year or months to an election. Wakili,
yes,
praising you, you know, Gibson Gesore has won many cases, he's a very good lawyer, you know, he did this, he's handling this and that, and does not mean that take this case and run with it. That's not an endorsement that Gibson Gesore should now take this case and do it. They're two different things.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I fully agree with you, Victor. Politics is a mysterious game. And you got to know, I think, as Churchill has correctly put it, you got to know what was happening behind the scenes.
Yes.
Which, unfortunately, unless we were there, we couldn't tell. But from me, I take it that, you know, when the former Prime Minister was actually talking about supporting Kalonzo Musyoka, it was reacting to the President William Ruto's visit to Nyanza, where he actually told them that that you want to put Kalonzo. That one, I will beat him early in the morning. So you know, that is a statement he was reacting to, that you cannot come to my turf and then start besmirching one of my strong allies. It doesn't mean he's weak. He's a strong man, and he's a man, if we support him, he will beat you. I think that is the statement which Raila Amolo Odinga was actually putting it out. So when Dennis Onyango comes in to say that we didn't say we were going to support him in 2027 or we didn't endorse him, that's what he's trying to clarify, that, you know, our statement was basically reactionary to what the president had said during his speech in the region. And you know, the president and Raila Odinga and Kalonzo, the president likes taking chips at people, so he wanted to score a good one, and they did. And they did by making that statement, because immediately the former Prime Minister came to his defense and said, no, you cannot talk about that. If it were me, you cannot talk about Churchill. You have come a long way, you know, such things. So that is politics. But then later, you need to give a clear clarification so that the combination does not go ahead to the 2027 election thinking that our man is the one who has been endorsed. And then we have a long time between now and 2027. So I think that is the context under which these statements were made, and it should be taken as such, not any other way. That's how I see it from my side. But politics in this country, it could also be now that we are in a guest game, that it could also be that there have been other discussions between Honorable former Prime Minister and the President, which could have happened, or some emissaries could have been sent at night. You know, politics has these night emissaries whom we never get to know who they are. Till they reveal themselves.
Visitors.
Till they nocturnal visitors. Till they reveal themselves. Way after the term is done, 2-3 years back is when they come out and say, you know, we are the people behind that.
Why Kalonzo Musyoka? Azimio House is big enough. Martha Karua is here, Jeremiah Kioni is here, Maina Njenga is here, talk of Eugene Wamalwa, that brigade is there. You know, the former governor, Mwangi, that house is huge enough. But why Kalonzo Musyoka? When you had the president talk about Kalonzo Musyoka, then Raila Odinga runs back to Bondo and talk about, you know, not Kalonzo. Why not somebody else?
I think among the luminaries in the Azimio, Kalonzo stands off as the person who can garner the most, other than Raila. These other candidates, I believe. You look at the statistics. Even Martha Karua did not even deliver our own constituency back in Gishugu. Because William Ruto trounced them flat-footed. So that is, she has a lot of mileage to cover, especially to bring in the flock of Central. You talk of the other Mwangi area, which is his constituency, because he's no longer governor. He was more relevant when he was governor. And the Kioni also is some individual who I don't know whether he has very strong backing in his region. Which there's also the story that he did not vote when he was the running mate. The other time he did not vote for his president. So whether that is true or not true is something which is still out. Of course, he has reviewed. But with such stories, and Maina Njenga, of course, has his cases, and of course he's been all over. We don't know why he's being arrested almost every week. So those are people, clearly the battle is between the two principals, that's Kalonzo, and then they have their backing from their regions, which is solid, which is solid and untouched. Okay. So, you know, that gives them a clear mileage.
So, Churchill, is it a case of reversal or a strategy?
I think it's well, it's a mix of strategy and clarification.
Why not strategy?
You know, I say clarification because when you contextualize, sometimes in as much as every word that a politician says has a meaning beyond towards a checkmate, you know, beyond what you can see, there is also sometimes politicians are drawn to respond, as Wakili has said, to respond to specific instances, and then leave it for the public to decide how they will interpret whatever they say.
Right.
All right.
Right.
So he may at that point have been responding, and it makes a lot of sense. He may have been responding and still giving an assurance, responding to the president's the president's proclamation that will then have left the Luo nation and the Kamba nation, you know, with hopeless. And at the same time, he was doing it in an open-ended manner, so that he leaves the public to interpret it the way they can. Then later on, he comes to clarify, because you see, some of these things like endorsements, and you know, there are things that you will find if it was really one that is done, thought out, and one that they really mean, then there would have been more strategic discussions and meetings. And in fact, it may not have been done in in Busia. Maybe they would have called for a press conference somewhere in Nairobi, in Capitol Hill or something, with all the glare of the cameras of the international and local media, because they wanted to project their potential candidate into the international community and into the national arena.
Yes.
That was not the kind of
what do you think the discussion is now along these corridors and along the streets, with the Kalonzo Musyoka's name being mentioned almost now 3 times, 3 consecutive days? What do you think is the discussion out there from the pundits, from the political strategists, from Wakilis, from you people? what is the discussion out there in terms of, because 2027 is just across the road for politicians. It's just a few.
What is interesting for me, Victor, is the fact that Kalonzo Musyoka seems not to have been bothered or has come out to say anything.
He's not even reacted to that statement.
He's not even said, how can you retract?
Yes.
But then there's something I want to also bring to the attention of what we are missing out, is that who is Raila Odinga? I mean, he's been known to be saying this, signing memorandums here and there, and then turns back the following week. He's driving along the road, he sees a huge crowd, then he asks, who are these people in there? He goes and says, Kibaki Tosha. That becomes the national. So this is the kind of man Raila is, and he has pretty much benefited out of this to a very great stretch. So he's actually playing politics in his own name. So that should be actually be known that it's politics. The fact that Kalonzo has not come out to say anything, or any campaign leader come out, we know of this senator who always comes out, God's blessing. Kalonzo is, the man has not spoken. Then there could be something which they are trying to project, and maybe they are comfortable with the statement that Kalonzo is now being talked about, or they want to give him a profile, at least in the arena of social media in Kenya, which so that at least there's something being talked about the man, because every mention or every media attention is good attention for politicians, whether good or bad. But for him, he's gaining mileage.
Let's profile Kalonzo Musyoka your own way.
Kalonzo Musyoka comes as one of the longest serving public leaders
there you
in
got
Kenya.
the Raila statement.
The same way.
He has become
a Christian. He's a Christian and he's a campaign leader who has a very strong backing. He's a lawyer. He's a lawyer, but then there's always something missing from Kalonzo's equation. Of course, he has a national appeal, but he lacks strongly on the charisma perspective of moving the crowds. I think if he can get people who can do that for him, or he can practice that, because that's where Raila beats him hands down. That's where Ruto beats him hands down. And they feel like this man has everything, but there is one thing which is very important he doesn't have. Once he can be able to cultivate that, I think he could be one of the key Machiavellian leaders. But that, it's not something which you build. It's something which you have to go out of your way to actually do that. And then it's kind of national negotiations, discussions around on canvassing to ensure that you have backing from around the region, especially among the political class, is also a bit wanting. So like Raila, he can go everywhere, can go to coast. He's welcomed like his home, which there's a huge Kamba population in coast, but Raila seems to have more appeal in coast than Kalonzo. You go to Western, Raila shows up in Western and says, mimi ni mtu wenyu, mimi ni mjukuu wa wanga sijui wa 13. And these people buy the story, which Kalonzo cannot be able to do. The president himself, once he went to Nyanza and he did a successful 1 week trip. And nobody said anything. He made statements which we are discussing up to today. Rarely does Kalonzo make such limelight or create such particular statements which are national appealing and attracts attention nationally.
But whichever way you look at it, gentlemen, don't you think that statement already opened that door of go out there, you have the blessing? This is me, Raila Odinga, speaking and praising you. And based on what you've said, Wakili, Raila Odinga has that tag with him. He can stop somewhere in the middle of just buying roasted maize and all of a sudden there is a crowd surging. And making that statement to, with reference to Kalonzo Musyoka, don't you think that's now an open, blessing for Kalonzo Musyoka that, you know what, go out there. I've talked about you, I've recommended you, so you're free and make your own moves.
Exactly. There's that political capital that you get by association. And one of the things that the former vice president will most definitely benefit from is the fact that, the people who endear themselves to the former prime minister is because of some track record that they attribute to him and their consideration of his contribution into the democratization of Kenyan politics. And by association, everybody who associates with him is likely to get that political capital transferred. And so he knows that. And he knows that there are people who, when I just say, if I say Wakili is the man, they'll not even question anything. They will
That's a clear recommendation.
They'll just go for it, whether Wakili is good for the country or whether he's bad for the country, because Raila has said we will go for it. So he knows he has that ability and power. And sometimes in the game of politics, you throw in a few words, to check on how your opponent is going to react.
Right.
Because you see, we have been in a game where we are, or in a sphere where we are configuring ourselves that, the next general election is coming, who is going to stand against the current president? And everybody has been, the only person we are still seeing here is who? Is Raila, all right? But then, and so, like, every game has not changed. So the question is, assuming we make the public to begin to see that, there is an alternative.
Yes.
And everybody has been looking up to who is going to be the successor of the former prime minister.
And that's why I ask a question, was it a case of reversal or strategy? And you said the clarification. So is it strategy? Because strategy could mean you threw a bait and then wait for it. If there is some kind of shake under the water, then there's something there. All right? Then throw it out. If there is nothing, then you move to the next stage. Could it be part of strategy? The rule of the game, scatter and gather, whichever way you want to work with it. So who is playing the scatter here and who is playing the gather game? And who is throwing the bait? and who is being caught?
The epicenter is still one. The opponent is known. The Kenya Kwanza is an opponent here.
Yes.
And you're like asking ourselves, is that all right? So we have option A that has been being the scenario, and option A has been we have had the former prime minister running, and this has been the card. And maybe it's already beginning to play out again.
Yes.
Now, assuming that we now get an option B and bring it to the fore into the public debate, how will our opponents react? All right? And depending on the two reactions, you can then be able to make an objective engagement on which one to take a move that will give a checkmate to the opponent. So it's an issue of creating multiplicity of options for the opponent, so that you confuse the opponent and make the opponent you want to see to what extent and to what extremes can the opponent go to achieve his goal. And then you begin to debunk it on the back scene, so that by the time he's getting to his last game, you hit it and is out.
Do you think yes, I should respond to that as well. Do you think Kenya Kwanza should start reading something out of that statement, whether it was political, whether it was just a way to neutralize the president's statement in Nyanza?
That's I think what I also want to react upon.
Go ahead.
You see, it's also a game of strategy. It's a game of strategy whereby Kenya Kwanza won, and they have been having a very good run. It's also to destabilize them. It's also because you're imagining the next place where the president has not gone is to campaign. He has been to Kisii, he's been to Coast, he's been to Nyanza. So the only next target could be Ukambani. So making that statement was for Raila could have been very strategic, that so that the Kamba people are actually assured that we're still in one, so that when he goes there, they already know that we have some assurance from the other side.
Yes.
So, and we don't have any reason, we don't see much room joining this particular camp. That is one. The other option is, given that Kenya Kwanza won, the profile of Azimio might have gone down, or the morals have gone down. And selling Raila only is not a very good strategy. So it's good to throw the bait on the other side, so that Now, even the luminaries in Kenya Kwanza could also start focusing there and also raise his profile.
Exactly.
Once you raise his profile politically or nationally, then in 2027, you never know what will happen. Yeah. It could be maybe Kalonzo saying, I think we are still together with, I'm backing him. But the profile will already be so high, and Raila's profile will be so high, so that they can have a nationwide appeal, so that they also try to water down what Kenya Kwanza has done. Remember, they are also always out there trying to campaign in their territories.
Yes. With that statement, what do you think the political strategists in Kenya Kwanza are now thinking?
They have run back to the drawing board that this thing is shifting. The territory is shifting, so we need to be focused on both now. It's not only Raila, let's focus on Kalonzo too, because things are moving fast.
Because, and I agree with what Wakili says, because you see, sometimes when there is a focus on one individual, then you will realize that the opposing politicians will want to oppose him to persona. All right? So you oppose him in strategies, his policies, to the person. But then, by shifting to another person, then you're like, okay, you now got to shift. How do you then begin to say some of the negative things that you have been saying about the former Prime Minister? How do you then begin to transfer them to the Kalonzo Musyoka? So you realize that you're thrown off balance, and you got to, and you know, the moment, remember that there are some things that you will most likely say about Raila that you cannot say about Kalonzo. Because when you say about him, you lose risking. You risk losing some of your support base that you have maybe gathered in his territory. That, and you know, maybe there are sentiments that you wouldn't care saying about Raila because you know maybe some of his support base might not change. But you cannot say them on Kalonzo, because you are trying to, you are in a balance of trying to win his constituency without him.
Do you think Kalonzo can be a kingmaker?
He has been. That's what he's been.
Yes.
That's why he's backed the former Prime Minister.
That's why it's being discussed up to now. But then also there's something I want to add. If I was a strategist for Azimio, I will be doing Kalonzo, and I will also choose somebody from the mountain. They need to raise their profile in the mountain. So once they have some profile raised in the mountain, then you have three options to deal with. So that now you focus on either Martha Karua or Kioni or whoever you choose, because in the region they don't have, their credibility has gone down, if I may use that word. If you can be able to project yourselves in the mountain and have good backing, do a rally in Nyeri, Muranga, and Kirinyaga, and just the numbers, you know, that really will put the Kenya Kwanza equation to confusion, and then declare Kalonzo.
Very quickly, gentlemen, look at it this way. It's Kalonzo until 2027. Then Kalonzo says, you know what, the discussion has been this way. Then based on the profile that's been built around Kalonzo Musyoka to galvanize his voting bloc and his profile, then voila, Raila Odinga.
It shifts, yes.
That now caused the strategy now.
And that will be the most strongest equation.
Exactly.
Because as of now, their profiles have gone down. Because it's Kalonzo, it was Raila who was on the ballot, so he lost. So Kalonzo has got to be moved up so that they gather whatever it is, the simple. You know, there are people who voted for Kenya Kwanza who could not vote for Raila as an individual, but can, if it's Kalonzo, they will be like, this one we can vote. So if you can gather those loose chippings and then add them onto the tray, then you will be one of the strongest and formidable forces.
And I think the bottom line is that irrespective of the timing, I think in terms of succession, the former Prime Minister still hold Kalonzo very key, irrespective of which election. So he might decide to be a kingmaker in 2027, but that will still act more like, it will still act as a stepping stone into the next election. Because you see, in the long run, he's going to, they will need for a succession. And I think that in the succession equation of Raila, Kalonzo is at a top level.
And remember, that discussion has already started. You remember the brother himself who is turned 80 now, at some point a few weeks back mentioned that Raila needs to think of a succession plan. I think with Orengo or somebody, I don't remember well, but you know, that's a discussion which Raila also came out and said, I'm still here.
Gentlemen, so a lot of things happening across the world. Very quickly, before we wrap it up, let's just cross over and see what's happening. We all know what's happening in Gaza, in Israel, and now Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu calls for world unity against Hamas. Our war is your war. That's what Netanyahu is saying, that Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday called for world unity against Hamas in an address to the Knesset, I think I got it right. The Israeli military said on Monday that Hamas and other Palestinian militants are holding 199 hostages in Gaza, a figure higher than previous estimates. That's what's here. You can also continue. That is Prime Minister Netanyahu. He's been here before. And we also know our relationship with Israel. On the front page of the BBC, it's the same thing. Biden to visit Israel as rocket attacks continue and Gaza crisis grows. What does really remain to us? We are waiting to see how this is going to pan out. Now that Biden is, those are the pictures of what's really happening, the bulldozers. It's a mess. Perhaps the mass graves and the bombings happening there in Israel. And now it continues. So that's what we are seeing. Gentlemen, when your brother's house is on fire, make sure that you take a look at what's happening. What do you think we can do to the world? Now Netanyahu is also calling for the world. Very quickly, 20 seconds.
I think that it's important for the international community to follow the rules of war and especially protect civilians. I think that's something that really need keen interest on. Yes.
Okay. Wakili?
For me, I think the situation in Gaza is very appalling, and we expect especially bodies like the UN to have made very clear statements. You see, because the other people would have expected to rein in and bring sobriety is the US. The US was already siding with Israel. So we need some fresh pair of minds who can actually, because it's Hamas which attacked the Israelis, not the Palestinians in Gaza.
All right.
And that needs to be looked at so that we safeguard the lives of those people also.
Okay. So, thank you so much. Wakili, Gibson Gesore.
Thank you.
Churchill, who is also a political analyst and governance expert. Asante sana for coming. Short and sweet. That's how we do it on Tuesday. Asante sana. We are taking a break, but we'll come over, heading straight to Radio Taifa for the discussion. Stay with us. My name is Victor Lo. Good morning.
hayawi huwa. Rais aliweka ahadi ya kwamba ataleta universal health coverage. Nataka kualika tarehe 20 mwezi wa 10 kule Kericho County. Mje tujumuike pamoja na Wakenya wote kuhakikisha ya kwamba hii universal health coverage inakuwa launched. Karibuni sana.
Oh, come on, Leo. Hata wewe unajeka mbele. Mimi sielewi una wasiwasi wa nini. I mean, I'm very sure mmejipanga sawa.
Kwani ni nini na nyinyi? Mbona mnaingia room ya madem?
Sisi ni maafisa polisi.
So,
Leo Faza. Uko chini ya ulinzi na unahitajika kuandamana nasi hadi kituoni.
Kwa nimefanya nini sasa? Boss. Nafsi yako itakuwa jibu na hilo walijua. Wewe toka, nenda zako bwana. Toka. Haya ndio unafanya nini? Uniue tena? Ama nikuue mimi? Tuje tuwe sote huku. Naonekana leo huna story leo. Wewe mbavu usicheze na mtu.
It's a cocktail of emotions. The puns that cracks up the family. Greed that yields power and a hunger for success. Trends turn to foes. Survival for the fittest is the drive.
Who are we blackmailing?
But nothing beats the feud in a family where one disappears and another fights for the crown.
It was not supposed to go this far.
It's the desire to succeed that keeps us going, the deception that keeps us digging, and the laughter pill that keeps us living.
Wasalan wa marhaba mpenzi mtazamaji wa runinga KBC Channel 1, na kwa muda wote ulikuwa naye mwenzangu Victor Olo ambaye alikuwa anapiga siasa kimpango pale, lakini kibao sasa kinageuka kwa kumpumzi sawa na hiyo, lakini sasa sisi tunapiga siasa za ushujaa. Mahali popote ulipo mtazamaji, ni furaha iliyoje asubuhi leo kwa kuchagua runinga ya KBC Channel 1 kuwa kianzio chako cha siku kwenye mpango mzima wa Good Morning Kenya. Kumbuka kila siku ya Jumanne kuanzia saa 2 hadi saa 3 huwa ni ushirikiano kati ya runinga ya KBC Channel 1 na redio ya kitaifa KBC Radio Taifa Sauti ya Kenya. Kumbuka mtazamaji, ni kipindi cha kipekee katika Jamhuri tukufu ya Kenya. Hakuna kwingine, ni hapa tu. Unasikika redioni na unaonekana kwenye runinga. Karibu mtazamaji. Mimi ni mtangazaji wako, jina langu naitwa Rashid Momkondo. Kumbuka mtazamaji, tarehe 20 siku ya Ijumaa ni siku kubwa sana katika taifa la Kenya, ambapo ni siku kuu ya mashujaa. Kwa nini tuandike na wino ilhali mate hapo? Rashid, sio hivyo. Kwa nini tuandike na mate ilhali wino upo? Kila mwaka mtazamaji, wakati kama huu Kenya huangazia sana utambulizo wa mashujaa wake. Katiba ya mwaka 2010 mtazamaji imetenga tarehe 20 mwezi Oktoba kama siku ya kuwatambua mashujaa wake. Awali katika miaka michache iliyopita, Kenya imeanza kutambua mashujaa, sio tu wale ambao walipigania uhuru, bali pia wale ambao wanatekeleza majukumu mbalimbali katika jamii yetu. Kenya imeunda baraza la kuwatambua mashujaa, yani Kiingereza National Heroes Council, baraza la mashujaa nchini. Hata hivyo msikilizaji, ndani ya studio tuna wageni ambao watakuwa tunazungumza nao kuhusiana swala hili. Upande wangu wa kulia ni ndugu Steven Mau ambaye yeye ni mkurugenzi katika idara ya huduma za maktaba. Karibu sana bwana Steven.
Asante sana Rashid.
Na upande wangu wa kushoto niko naye Bi Mueni Lundi ambaye ni mmoja wa mashujaa ambaye ametambuliwa na baraza la mashujaa nchini. Amefanya kazi sana katika kuleta amani, kuimarisha afya, vile vile pia haki za kibinadamu na kadhalika. Atatueleza mengi. Karibu sana ndani ya studio zetu.
Shukran Rashid.
Labda tu nikianza na moja kwa moja na ndugu bwana Steven Mao ambaye ni mkurugenzi katika maktaba ya idara za huduma humu nchini. Shujaa ni nani?
Shujaa ni mtu yeyote ambaye amejitolea muhanga kutenda jambo, pengine jambo la kawaida, lakini analifanya kwa njia ya kipekee, hususan kuwasaidia wenzake, kusaidia nchi yetu na pia kuleta sifa.
Labda tueleze mbinu ambazo zinatumika kuwatambua mashujaa nchini Kenya. Utajuaje kwamba Mweni ni shujaa? Utajuaje kama Innocent Wafula ni shujaa? Je, kwa kubeba jikamera jikubwa tu ndio ushujaa?
Sana ukiangalia Kenya, sheria ya mashujaa inaitwa the National Heroes Act, ambayo ilianza kutumika mwaka wa 2014 na imeweka vitengo kadhaa vya mashujaa. Lakini hata hivyo tunategemea sana jamii ili kutualifu kuhusu vitendo vya ushujaa ambavyo vimetendwa na watu huko mashinani. Na kwa muda mrefu kabla hili baraza la kitaifa la mashujaa alianza kufanya kazi, tumekuwa tukitegemea wale wanaitwa maofisa wa serikali huko mashinani. Wanashirikiana na viongozi wa jamii kuwatambua watu ambao wamefanya mambo ya muhimu kusaidia jamii. Lakini kuanzia mwaka huu mambo yamebadilika kidogo. Tumeanza kutekeleza kwa makini sheria hiyo ya mashujaa, na kuanzia mwaka huu tuliomba wananchi wa kawaida kuteua watu ambao wanafikiria wanaweza kuwa mashujaa, watupe sababu zao za kujua kama hawa ni mashujaa, na tukapata majina zaidi ya 500 na ambayo tumeyapiga msasa, na sasa tunatarajia kutoka kwayo tutaweza kupata mashujaa ambao tutawatambua mwaka huu.
Kwa hiyo mlipata kutoka kwa wananchi mapendekezo ya majina 300. Na kiwango chenu mnataka majina mangapi?
Inategemea. Kwa mwaka huu tunafanya kazi na majina kama 150, 160. Ndio.
Labda kabla kurudi kwa shujaa wetu upande wa pili au upande wa kushoto, je, shujaa sharti awe na maadili gani?
Shujaa sharti awe na maadili ambayo yamependekezwa katika katiba yetu. Tunajua katiba inazo zile tunaita national values and principles. Maadili kama uaminifu, patriotism,
ndio, uzalendo,
ndio, na pia maadili kama kuwa mwaminifu, kwa sababu uaminifu ni jambo la kipekee.
Ndio. Alright, mtazamaji, ni sauti yake kama nilivyokuambia ndugu Steven Mao, ambaye ni mkurugenzi katika idara huduma za maktaba. Nirudi upande wangu wa kushoto. Kwanza Bilundi, nikupongeze kwa kuorodheshwa miongoni mwa mashujaa nchini Kenya.
Asante.
Na labda utuambie kama mmoja wa mashujaa nchini, umefanya kazi ipi mpaka hawa jamaa wakakutambua wewe ni shujaa?
Kazi ya mimi ni msanii.
Ndio.
Haswa katika michezo ya kuigiza. Hiyo ndio kazi ambayo nimefanya.
Ndio.
Katika njia tofauti tofauti. Katika jamii, katika jukwaa, katika sinema na kadhalika. Hiyo ndio kazi yangu.
Katika hili swala la usanii, labda kwenye jukwaa, katika sinema na vile vile pia kwenye jamii, ni kitu gani ambacho umewahi kukifanya kwenye jamii mpaka jamaa wakaona licha ya kwamba ni msanii lakini ana ushujaa ndani yake?
Kama msanii, unajua kuna mambo kadha wa kadha lazima ufikirie wakati unapofanya hiyo kazi. Na la kwanza ni ndio wengi wanasema kwamba ukienda kufanya kazi ya usanii, fikiria vile utakuwa kusaidia watu kuwa na raha, wacheke na kadhalika. Lakini kuna mengine zaidi ya hapo hivyo. Kazi ambayo mimi nafanya haswa ni sifanyi kazi ya usanii sana kwa jukwaa. Nafanya katika jamii. Na hiyo ni michezo ya kuigiza tofauti. Kwa sababu tunafanya kazi ambayo vile ulivyozungumza ukasema nimefanya mambo ya uliitaje human rights.
Haki za kibinadamu.
Haki za kibinadamu, mambo ya afya, mambo mengi na kusaidia jamii kuangalia shida zetu ziko wapi, na kujaribu kuwasaidia hao wenyewe waangalie kama hii ndio shida yetu tutaitatua vipi. Na kina nani tunahitaji watusaidie katika kutatua hii. Kwa hivyo mchezo wa kuigiza unakuwa tu ni njia ya kusaidia jamii kutatua shida zao. yao.
Ndiyo.
Wakijua na wakielewa kabisa tukienda hivi, kwa hivyo mchezo unakuwa njia ya kujaribu kuanza kutatua hilo. Yani kwa Kiingereza utasema mchezo wa kuigiza unakuwa ni rehearsal ya kwenda kutatua hiyo shida. Hiyo ndio kazi ambayo nimefanya kwa miaka mingi sana.
Right. Labda ulitambuliwa lini kama shujaa? Mwaka gani? Mwaka uliopita. Sasa katika swala hili zima umeelezea vizuri kwamba usanii si tu kwamba pengine uko jukwani kutuchekesha, lakini lazima wazungu wasema leave a mark katika ile jamii ambayo umeifanya. Na ukienda ukifanya katika jamii huo, uko peke yako ama uko na wenzako wanakusaidia?
Yani kuna wenzangu wananisaidia, sifanyi peke yangu. Naweza kufanya peke yangu, wakati mwingine nategemea ni kazi gani naenda kufanya. Kwa sababu pia kufanya kazi ya michezo ya kuigiza katika jamii pia iko na element nyingine tofauti. Kwa mfano utapata kuna vijana ambao wanataka kuingia kazi ya usanii na hawana uhakika ni njia ama ni mbinu.
Former Wajir Governor, Ambassador Mohamed Abdi Mohamud, is one of the lucky ministers to have served in both the KANU and NAC regimes. The former teacher is credited with changing the fortunes of Wajir when he served as an MP, assistant minister, and later on a cabinet minister. Mohamed Abdi Mohamud was a school teacher when he ventured into politics and won the Wajir East parliamentary seat in the 1997 polls on a KANU ticket. He became the 6th KANU MP for Wajir West following the win, and the then President Daniel Moi would appoint Mahmoud as an assistant minister in the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and later on in the same capacity in the Ministry of Transport and Communication. After the 2003 election, when KANU was ousted from power by the National Rainbow Coalition NAC, Mahmoud was one of the leaders from the pastoralist community who retained their seats on the party's ticket. He would later on find his way to cabinet again when he was appointed the Minister for Regional Development, becoming the first chief of the newly created ministry by President Mwai Kibaki. Mahmoud faced numerous challenges in the new ministry, including funding, but he spearheaded the formulation of policies, including pushing cabinet to approve more funding for regional development authorities. He is also credited with initiating efforts to revive the multi-billion shillings Tana Delta Rice Scheme, and in 2007 launched the 3 billion shillings Kimira Oluch Smallholder Irrigation Scheme in Rachuonyo and Homa Bay districts. He also led negotiations that saw commercialization of Wajir Airport, which had served as a military base. During his tenure as minister in 2007, Mahmoud is remembered for his tiff with the then head of civil service Francis Mudaura regarding appointment of parastatal chiefs. Mahmoud had called a press conference to address their differences in appointments, which was seen as a stunning departure from the norm for government communication. Later on in the 2007 general election, Mahmoud decided not to defend his seat as Wajir East MP and chose to serve as Party of National Unit PNU elections coordinator for Northern Kenya. After leaving cabinet, Mahmoud served as Kenya's ambassador to Saudi Arabia. He unsuccessfully vied for Wajir gubernatorial seat in 2013, but in 2017 he clinched the seat on a Jubilee ticket. Mahmoud is remembered for his efforts to transform the arid and semi-arid regions in health, water provisions, local and regional diplomacy. For the cabinet, I'm Ben Troinju.
Born
in 1952 in Kajiado South in the then Kajiado district, Geoffrey Parpai began his education at the Loitoktok Primary School and later joined Olkejuado Secondary School for his O-level education. He later joined the Kenya Institute of Administration, now School of Government, where he trained as an accountant. In 1982, he became the clerk of Olkejuado Town Council, where he worked until 1992 when he joined elective politics. Parpai would join KANU, but in 1991, after the repealing of Section 2A of the Constitution that allowed multipartyism, he would decamp to the newly formed Democratic Party led by Mwai Kibaki. He contested the Kajiado South post but did not win after managing 9,383 votes against the incumbent MP Philip Singaru of KANU, who won with 12,292 votes. Singaru was Professor George Saitoti's ally. Despite the setback, Parpai's political star would shine from that time on and would make a comeback in the 1997 polls, winning the seat after he beat Singaru with a margin of over 3,500 votes. During these elections, Parpai would become Democratic Party presidential candidate Mwai Kibaki's appointment in the Maasai region. In parliament, Parpai was known to sometimes lose his cool when discussing issues to do with the Ma community. As an MP, Parpai was pushing for the elevation of Loitoktok division to sub-county status. He would join Mwai Kibaki to form the National Rainbow Coalition (NAC) to topple KANU, which had ruled since independence. He was shortly after appointed the minister in charge of personnel management. His assistant minister was Maurice Zoro, the then MP for Kaloleni. In the Kibaki cabinet, Parpai remains one whose competencies as a minister was barely tested owing to his brief stint, but he was a trusted President Mwai Kibaki's lieutenant in the Ma community. For the cabinet, I'm Ben Troy Njue.
Thuita Kimemia was the secretary to the cabinet during President Uhuru Kenyatta's first term. In 2012, Kimemia was confirmed as head of public service and secretary after acting for almost a year, just 3 months before the 4th March 2013 general elections. Kimemia had previously worked as permanent secretary for internal security. After the elections in March 2013, Kimemia was retained as head of public service and secretary to the cabinet. In May 2013, Parliament's Administration and National Security Committee approved Kimemia's appointment as secretary to the cabinet. Kimemia was the first holder of the office after it was separated from the public service arm. Kimemia became a key cog in the transition and setup of the new government. His understanding of government proved crucial in the constitution of the new administration and its structures. He was the chairman of both the transition committee and the handover process, and so quickly became the nerve center of Uhuru's government. Kimemia spent about 2 years guiding the transition process and helped structure what became the foundation of Uhuru's government. In April 2015, Kimemia's long civil service career came to an end after he was replaced by then Interior PS Monica Juma, a career ambassador and former university lecturer. His exit from government opened a door in politics. In the 2017 general election, Kimemia was elected Nyandarua County Governor, where he served 1 term. Jackie Wambiru, The Cabinet. Mandera County is located in the northeastern part of Kenya. It borders Wajir, Ethiopia, and Somalia.
I, Abdul Ibrahim Haro, having been elected a member of the National Assembly, do swear in the name of the Almighty God. Mheshimiwa Kore, or Abdul Ibrahim Haro, was born in a village in Elwak. Elwak is a sub-county in Mandera South Constituency, which is in Mandera County. Mandera County is right on the border with Somalia. Partly on one side it's bordering Ethiopia, and on the other side it's bordering Somalia. So I was born in a village called El Hagarsu, that is the Tumtu, in 1972. Not a very young man.
It's a long time.
And initially, when we were born, around that time, our parents had a lot of livestock. Particularly my family was a family of camel herders. They had cattle, they had sheep. And the first school usually, when you just come of age, around 6 years, when a normal child is supposed to be going to nursery, the first nursery you are sent to is to herd livestock. And usually as a small boy you start with goats. In fact, you start with the kids of the goats, then you graduate to herding the goats, then you graduate to herding either the cattle or the camel.
It's like a rite of passage.
Just like a rite of passage. So when I was young, when I was sent to look after kids, the goat kids, which are normally herded just around the village, I was not a very good herder. I used to take the kids out, and immediately I'm out of the sight of the homes. I look for a cool, shady place and I sleep. So in the evening, when I take back the kids, they're either missing 5, 10, and when I went home every evening, I used to be rebuked. I was a very bad herder, and they thought I was useless because that is the life. And then they thought, what do we do with this guy now? He's so useless. And they agreed now they will dump me in a school somewhere.
Yes, you are not useful to them.
I'm not useful to them. So they were going to condemn me to a school somewhere. And that's how I ended up joining school.
Yes.
I went through my primary schools. I never went to nursery. I started straight from primary school. And then I went all the way through high school. I joined Jamhuri High School, finished my Form 4. I think I was among the very first 844 graduates. I joined the University of Nairobi, took a course in, agriculture, BSc Agriculture, and I took the option of livestock production. And later, I also joined the University of Nairobi for my master's in international conflicts management. Immediately after university, I joined international NGO called Practical Action. It's a British NGO working in Mandera then. So my first job, sent me back home. When many youths who finish university would like to have, jobs in Nairobi, jobs in big cities, and buy cars, buy houses, and what have you, by tweak of fate, so if I may put it that way, my first job sent me to Mandera.
Feel some type of way?
What that?
Some type of way? Did it make you feel some type of way?
Yes, I felt, why am I coming back home? An area which I'm very familiar with, area which I've been here for all my childhood. But then, as I realized later in life that perhaps God had his own ways of preparing me for what was to come, because that was a humanitarian organization, and the region being a humanitarian region, so I got involved in those issues that affected our people from a very early age. And I started now visiting displaced homes. I started visiting, homes where disaster has struck, whether floods, whether drought, whether pastoralists who are being dropped out of their way of life because of the droughts. The region used to have a lot of conflicts, either between ethnic groups or even internationally when they were invaded by neighbors from across Somalia. I came right at the center of what was happening. That is what exactly drove me into politics, because I started now becoming angry with those people who are causing these problems to the people, and I also became a bit agitated because it appeared like the region then was not was very marginalized, so to speak, and that level of marginalization also put a lot of resentment in me about my leaders, about the national government, and I started questioning, why is there nobody doing anything about this problem? Why am I seeing girls drawn out of school and getting married to older men, and nobody's talking about these issues and the life of that girl is? So these are some of the things that actually prepared me early on. It's a very challenging job, but I love challenges. I never run away from challenges. I confront challenges. But as I told you earlier, the nature of the work that I was doing before was also very challenging, because I was working in very conflict-prone area. Things were very fluid, and you are dealing with emergencies all the time. So it's more or less like another type of emergency, being an MP, because every day you're dealing with issues concerning your constituents, issues concerning the national politics, issues concerning parliament, issues concerning budgets. You deal with different issues every day. But because of the background that I had, I am very much in touch with my people. I have very good channels of communication with my people in all the 5 wards in my constituencies, and I sort of get the real issues on the ground. And these are the issues I normally raise even in Parliament. Whenever I stand to raise an issue in Parliament, it's always informed by what's affecting my people on the ground. And I've raised quite one biggest problem I have in my constituency, and it's a challenge, not actually a problem, is that I have perhaps one of the biggest youth cohorts in Mandera County. My constituency has one of the biggest youth cohorts, especially from up to 18 years, 16, 18 years. It's a very huge population. And some of them have gone to school, they have certificates, they have university degrees, but all of them are unemployed. So the question of unemployment is a very big issue. I try to set up a small team to work with me in my constituency office, and I can assure you the demand of those who wanted to work with me was huge. I was not able to cope, and I received a lot of blame at the end of the day because I could not accommodate all of them, and those who missed out thought perhaps other parameters were used rather than the fairness and what have you. So my biggest manifesto, the biggest manifesto I have is how do I engage this youth, not necessarily in white collar jobs. How do we create opportunities for this youth, either by lobbying other organizations, or even by lobbying government, or even by creating income generating activities for this youth. And that is why I like the idea of digital economy, which the Kenya Kwanza government is proposing, and I'm trying to make sure I'll be one of the first MPs to create those ICT hubs in each of the wards in my constituency, so that the government has promised they will train 500 youths every year in those ICT hubs, and then they will also link them to digital jobs, so that that could also be one of the ways that I'm thinking I will help my youths in my constituency to come out of poverty, despite lobbying for them to have other opportunities. The other biggest issue I have in my constituency, and it's an issue which I need to deal with it one way or the other, is the issue of electricity. Energy.
I hope somebody is listening.
It's a big problem in my constituency, and 2 of the former MPs, one of the major reasons why they were sent home was the question of...
How far is the main power line?
We are off-grid, so we depend on this diesel-generated whatever. So for some reasons, KPLC has made my constituency, and LWAC being the center, has given me very few staff. So the staff capacity that I have in that small station is below par. I have no staff dealing with, for example, what they call operations and management. None. So that if anything goes wrong even with the machine, nothing happens. So power is the biggest problem, especially when we're talking of digital economy, when we're talking of internet. There are very many hustlers, the mamambogas, the kinyozis, those people who are hustling to sell cold water. It's a hot area, and cold water sells like hot cake, cold sodas, all those people suffer every time there is a blackout in that region, and blackout comes, it takes months before something is done about it. So that power is a big problem for my entire constituency, and all the 5 wards are affected. And if we need to pull these people out of, poverty that they are in, I think we need to address the question of power, so that we can have internet, so that we can have electricity. Our hospitals there are having problems. I have a hospital in a place called Kutulo, which is on a single phase, and it requires 3 phase for it to operate the machines. So because of that incessant blackout, sometimes we even deliver women using torches at night. We have a level 4 hospital, but we are delivering women using torches at times at night because of the incessant and blackout which has refused to go away. So electricity is 2 other major problem which I'll make sure I try to deal with it as a priority issue. And then of course the question of food security. Food security is a major issue. That place is a region which has always been dependent on relief food and what have you. We need to see how we can improve our production in terms of livestock production. Our people, and then there is the question of climate change and the way it is affecting that region, droughts and what have you. So those are 3 key priority areas: the youth problem, electricity and food security.
Tunapowasha vifaa vyetu, tunapata fursa ya kutangamana na wasikilizaji wetu.
Karibu sana thĩinĩ wa tabarĩra ya Rwiga.
Tunapeperusha utangazaji uliobobea katika habari,
nĩ ũndũ wa macio na mangĩ maingĩ,
burudani,
haha nĩ harĩa tũkoragwo tũkĩigua nyĩmbo mwaki nyĩmbo hot,
na hamasisho la kiroho. Usiachwe nyuma. Jiunge nasi kwa safari ya kufana katika 99.5 FM. Soro FM.
Wait, I can explain.
My shoulder, it was nearly dislocated.
I came here as fast as I could. You guys were in the north while I was in the south. Hey, I thought you guys were with a client.
I'm sorry, but I've decided that I'm not gonna do it.
To be honest, when it all happened, I was really terrified. But once you 3 arrived, I felt safe again. I was so fixated on the idea that this place would make me secure. But I just realized that if I sign this document, it might make things worse.
Kenyans, I want to take this opportunity as the Cabinet Secretary for Health to invite you to Kericho County on the 20th of October, where His Excellency the President shall be launching officially the universal health coverage. Come and witness over 4,000 community health promoters from across the county. They'll be showcasing what it is that we have been able to put together as a ministry. Welcome, Kenyans.
Are you insane, Olga? What are you playing at? You haven't interested me in a long time.
Ask your husband where he was this morning. I'm not crazy. I demand that you release me. Can't you understand?
What I have to tell you goes beyond just my feelings. It's something that I should have told you a long time ago. You have no idea how I regret not telling you before. Anibal and Olga were indeed lovers. He's the one who's lying, not her.
How long have you known this?
I found out soon after you both arrived in San Juan.
Thank you for staying with us. This is Good Morning Kenya, and my name is Vivian Dagwa. Now, today being a Tuesday, you definitely know that it is Health Tuesday. And on Health Tuesday, we will be looking at heart diseases and some of the solutions to it. What are some of the most common cardiovascular diseases we have in the country? What are the causes to this? What are some of the treatment options? And what are some of the early signs and symptoms that you should look out for? Now, here to walk us through this particular conversation and just let us in on everything we need to know concerning this topic is Dr. Keith Ndindi, who is a consultant cardiothoracic surgeon. Thank you so much for creating time for us. How are you doing this morning?
Very fine, thank you, and thank you for having me.
If I may just go straight into what are some of the most common heart diseases in the country?
I'd like us to pan out maybe for just a moment, look at it from a helicopter overview of what we call cardiovascular diseases. Generally speaking, we have communicable and non-communicable diseases. And when you come to non-communicable diseases, we're really talking about cancers and cardiovascular disease. So when we thin down to cardiovascular disease, it is in that perspective of looking at generally what the health problems that Kenyans face. So when you talk about cardiovascular diseases, there are diseases of the heart, those are the cardiac diseases, but you also have vascular diseases. Those are diseases of the veins and arteries. These are the vessels that carry blood away from the heart and to the heart. But I think today we're really going to be talking about diseases of the heart itself.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about diseases of the heart itself, there are categories that I would like to just let our viewers know about. The diseases that generally affect the younger population. Mainly these are congenital heart diseases, meaning these are people that are born with these heart problems. And then there are acquired heart diseases that generally affect the older population. And here we talk about coronary artery disease, there's rheumatic artery disease, things like infectious endocarditis. So generally when you're talking about heart disease, those are the groupings that we like to let our people know.
All right, so the common ones that you've dealt with in the country are the ones that you've mentioned?
Yes. I think really one of the commonest is congenital heart disease. These are problems that children are born with. Usually, colloquially, we hear people saying someone was born with a hole in the heart.
Yes.
So that is quite common. But here in Kenya, like just in the rest of Africa, we've got something that we call rheumatic heart disease, which is an acquired disease of the heart that is really common amongst people with poor socioeconomic status. It is the cause of lots of cardiac death. But beyond that, in the older population, we've got something that we call coronary artery disease. This is really a lifestyle illness that affects the small vessels that supply the muscle of the heart. And they cause things like heart attack and many deaths.
All right. So what are the causes to some of these heart diseases that you've just mentioned?
Probably I'll start with the coronary artery disease that affects people that are a little older. In Kenya, though, we are seeing it in much younger populations. And as I mentioned, this is really a lifestyle illness, meaning that a lot of it is contributed by the foods that we eat. And as you know, we've slowly been shifting from what we call our traditional type of meals. We're doing more of Western type diets that are full of sugar, fats, and that is really causing a problem. The other thing is that we are not moving as much as we used to. These days, even Mama Mboga goes to the market on a boda. We used to walk quite a bit, but that doesn't happen anymore. So poor diet, lack of proper movement, what we like to call exercise. Here in Nairobi, I see people, you come from your house in the morning, maybe you live on a 7th floor, you get on a lift down to ground floor, you get on your car, then you get in the office and you're seated most of the day. So people are not moving as much. And so these are what we call lifestyle diseases. But most importantly, smoking. Coronary artery disease, smoking really contributes a huge deal. So though there is genetic risk, when you think about the lifestyle aspects that are actually controllable, those are the ones that really push people over. And then you start to have manifestations of coronary artery disease. When you talk about rheumatic heart disease, which is really common amongst the younger population. So in Kenya, most of the probably people between ages 10 to their early 20s, we see many of them having rheumatic heart disease, which is the result of an infection, a throat infection that's not controlled properly, then later on manifests as rheumatic heart disease. Then the congenital diseases that, for people who are born with, sometimes they're associated with certain nutritional deficiencies in the mother, lack of proper prenatal care, or sometimes it just happens, we don't know why, but then kids get born with congenital heart disease.
Yeah, I want to get back into what you just talked about, the fact that some of these diseases, we now see them in the younger aged population rather than, back then it was a disease, quote unquote, for the older generation. What exactly should we avoid eating, and what should we eat? Because you've said mainly it's because of the lifestyle. We're not walking as much. We're eating the wrong food. So what are these wrong foods that you're talking about, and what should we be eating?
When we break it down to the detail, they usually say the devil is in the detail. So it's important to think about it from a sugar perspective. Really the thing driving cardiovascular disease, not just in Kenya, but across the world, is sugar. And more specifically, what we call refined sugar, the simple sugars. And so table sugar that we add this day to everything that we are drinking. If you take even the juice that is sold in our supermarkets, lots of it is made of sugar. The soft drinks, I will not mention them by name, but just generally soft drinks that we use. And even there are secret added sugars, like the sauce that we use on the tables, it still has sugar. So we are consuming a lot of sugar. And the result of that is that we get bigger. So the obesity that we see is really driven by the sugar that we consume. One of the things that I noticed recently, even in church, our church, we have got kids that go for Sunday school, then they're given snacks thereafter. But what snacks are they getting? Again, purely simple sugars. So from an early age, we are beginning to change the way our kids look at this thing called good food. So good food is seen to be everything that is full of sugar. And so they grow with that, and then we are getting a population that then is bigger, so obesity is now a problem, not just in adults. We are literally having a crisis of childhood obesity. And with that comes higher levels of cholesterol in the body, and then the blood vessels pay the ultimate price. Because when cholesterol accumulates in the body, it blocks blood vessels, and then you now get coronary artery disease.
What maybe are some of the alternatives to something like table sugar? Is honey a better option to that?
It's actually not. A lot of people say that honey is natural sugar.
Yeah, it's organic. We thought
it's organic, but even table sugar is organic. At the end of the day, if you break it down to the molecules that actually make sugar, it's the same thing. What I would advise, though, there are foods that comprise of complex sugars, and a lot of what our older folks, the parents, grandparents used to take, things like the cassavas, the arrowroots, the sweet potatoes, they're made of more complex starch that once you take in the body, it takes a process to be broken down and is not absorbed quickly as simple sugar. So those are the better alternatives to have. And really, this idea of meals in between the day, so the idea of just, I've seen even when you go for conferences, the little sweets that are placed on table. So it's like we are always feeding. We've become like the animals in the farm that even through the night they're just chewing the cud. But then we are doing that with sugar, and so we're just consuming too much sugar. I think there's a concept that is called mindful eating, where you're getting a good meal in the morning. Most of it being complex sugar, most of it being proteins, quite a good chunk of vegetables, and then try to eat spaced out, morning, lunchtime, and in the evening. Really, this idea of meals in between the day does not help at all.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that honey is not a better option to this, because most of us, I'll speak for myself, I thought honey is the way to go. Like, I don't take sugar in my tea, but I put honey, and I thought honey is actually the way to go.
It is not.
So what should we alternate that with, or we just go sugarless?
if you can reduce the amount of sugar you're taking, so I know for many people it's difficult to go cold turkey, but if you can gradually reduce until a point where you actually don't need it anymore, that is the best way. And it's possible, it's doable. Literally, if I add now sugar to my tea, it's nauseating. So I think if you just start slowly, sometimes people take 4, like I used to take almost 4 teaspoons in my cup. Then slowly reduce that over time to a point where you really don't need to add in any more sugar. That's the way to go.
Okay, thank you for that. Now let's come to the oils that we take. You know, are there good oils and bad oils when it comes to cooking oils?
Yes, and the nutritionists will tell this to us in greater details. But there's a concept that we call the trans fats that are made in. If you look at the solid fats that are sold out there, the principle behind them is really the trans fats, and we try to avoid as much as possible. But if you can get your fats from things like avocado, these are natural fats, the better. And if you can reduce the amount of fats in the meals, fat actually, in terms of when you look at the food groupings, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, fats have got the highest concentration of calories, even more than what you find in carbohydrates. So when you're using fats, it's not bad to use them, but use them in moderation. So it is important to think about that, so that the meal that you have wholesomely, you're thinking, what is the caloric burden that this meal is giving me? But more importantly, I think beyond just what we eat, is to think about the amount that we eat. And many people are not thoughtful about it, especially when they do it a lot. So you're just spreading many meals along the day, and you discover by the end of the day you've taken so much. Many people now are getting into probably eating 1 meal a day. The people who are doing even intermittent fasting. We're realizing that you don't have to always eat. It's good to give your body a rest. It's not a bad idea.
All right, before I get into now some of the symptoms and the preventable ways, that is the treatment options for some of these diseases, I want to finish up on the diets, if you may allow me. Are we supposed to consume less dairy? Because I've had a debate on, dairy is bad and so forth. So are we supposed to consume less of it?
The debate will rage on for a long time, because even we in the medical community, there are those who would really advocate for no dairy. I know, for example, Africans generally have got higher levels of lactose intolerance. So there are many of us, as we grow a bit older, we find when you take milk, you start having bloating and problems like that. So lactose intolerance is a big problem, and if you're in that group, then you avoid it. But generally speaking, there's no problem with dairy in your diet. In fact, there are communities that like the more sour version, so they keep the milk, and mursik is a delicacy in many places. Where I come from, people really love mursik, so we can use it. But think about it wholesomely, because it's part of the caloric math that is part of your meal. So milk still has calories. So when you're having your meal, you're thinking about it wholesomely, including just how much is that bringing in. But even we in the medical community are not convinced one way or the other.
About dairy? About
milk, yes.
Okay, let's get into the symptoms. What are some of the early signs and symptoms of a heart problem?
I think I'll probably look at them as 2 separate groupings. So let me start first with the children, because I think we miss diagnosis in children a lot. And so most kids, by the time the right diagnosis is being made, it's too late for them to even get surgery or medication that will save their lives. In fact, I was inspired to get into heart surgery because I lost a friend, a high schoolmate. He was diagnosed very late, and by the time they were discovering he had a problem, it was just too late, and he passed on. And that is how I got inspired to even get into heart medicine, and specifically now to get into heart surgery. So when you're talking about kids, it is important for mothers to deliver in health institutions, because sometimes congenital heart problems are picked when the children are examined just after birth. So if these children are born in settings where there's no medical professional who can actually examine the kids, it's very possible to miss critical heart lesions that would otherwise be picked up and sorted out early. So that is number one. But number two, there's certain problems that children start having. Their kids, for example, the mothers notice when the child is breastfeeding, is sweating a lot, is having difficulty in breathing while breastfeeding. And this is not normal. And many times, that is the very first clue that there is a problem. So if you notice that your child seems to be sweating a lot, struggling to breathe as the child breastfeeds, it's important to have these children checked out. The other thing is just the way the children are growing. Many times, if a child has a heart problem, their rate of growth is not the same as the rate of growth of the normal children. So we usually generally refer to it as failure to thrive. A kid is just not growing like the rest. So it's good for children like those to be checked. But finally, you can have children having, other kids are running, and this kid just seems to be falling off the pace. And many times parents think maybe my child is just a little slower than the others. But if your child really is not keeping up with the rest, they always want to rest, then it's good for them to be checked out. And then lastly, one of the most common congenital heart problems we have in Kenya is called tetralogy of Fallot. And the way these kids usually behave, they like to squat all the time. And that squatting, there's something scientifically I'll not care to explain, but that squatting actually helps them. And so these kids naturally want to squat now and again.
What age are we talking about when you say kids?
So these are kids who are probably between the ages of 2 to 10.
Okay.
And you notice that when they start feeling breathless or feeling tired, they want to get down and squat. And there's something that squatting actually does in terms of their cardiovascular system to increase what we call peripheral resistance. So when you notice those things in a child, it is important for those children to be checked out. And then when they are checked out, we're able to pick these lesions early. So difficulty in breathing, excessive tiredness, that's squatting. Sometimes there's some discoloration like bluish lips or tongue, meaning not enough oxygen is going to the tissues. Again, that can be a clue that there is a particular problem, congenital problem that this child is having.
Okay, that's in children now.
So that is in children. And it is important to think about it that way, that in children they might present a little different. But in adults, because most of the time what we're dealing with in older adults is coronary artery disease, the presentation would be a little different. The most dramatic presentation is something that we call angina, which is pain that is caused by heart muscle not getting enough blood supply. So it is the classic, somebody feels a lot of pain in the chest. Usually on the left side, it moves, or we call it radiating to the jaw or left arm. Classically, that's how it presents. So we call that anginal pain. And that is an ominous sign. If you're having pain of that nature, that is not something that should be ignored.
So that's pain that starts on the left side of the heart going up, or could it just be pain from here going down?
Sometimes it presents in an atypical manner. So especially for people who have diabetes and more so in ladies actually. So it might not present with classically, we call it like crushing pain. Literally you feel like there's some weight on your chest that is crushing the chest, and that chest tightness and pain that radiates to that left side. Once you have that is something that really should be checked out in a proper health facility. So that typical anginal presentation, when we have that, we start thinking, could there be coronary artery disease? In fact, the way I look at it, I assume there is a coronary artery disease until proved otherwise. It could be other things. It could be pneumonia or problems with the gastrointestinal tract. But when you miss a heart problem, the results are many times fatal. So it's better to assume the worst, get proper checkup. Then the other way in which these heart conditions can present, even in adults, is just that difficulty in breathing, excessive.
I'll ask you to hold that thought, Doc.
Sure.
If you allow me, we take a short break and then we'll be back and you continue telling us some of these early signs that you can get to catch before it's too late.
Abantu ba Mintombu Yamore.
Your favorite Ekegusi station, Minto FM, is now at your doorstep. Enjoy the hottest Kisi music, informative and entertaining shows, and reliable news only on Minto FM. Tune in to Minto FM on 91.7 FM in Nyamira, Kisii and its environs. Minto FM.
1 year in office, 23 ministries. Time to review the journey in implementing the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. What is your assessment of the government's performance? Will they ace the performance test? Tune in to KBC News at 9 p.m. for the government scorecard.
Hayawi huwa Rais aliweka ahadi ya kwamba ataleta universal health coverage. Nataka kualika tarehe 20 mwezi wa 10 kule Kericho County. Mje tujumuike pamoja na Wakenya wote kuhakikisha ya kwamba hii universal health coverage inakuwa launched. Karibuni sana.
Welcome back to Good Morning Kenya. In case you're just joining us, this is Health Tuesday and we are talking about heart diseases and their solutions. Before we went for that break, Doc, you were just getting me into some of the symptoms when it comes to adults.
Yes. So as I mentioned, angina pain is probably the one that we bothers us the most. And it's important to emphasize that because once it's missed or misdiagnosed, patients die.
Yeah.
And so that's really important. But the other way in which patients present is still difficulty in breathing. So you find probably you run up the stairs, but then you start having difficulty as you run up the stairs. You're catching your breath after 2-3 steps. You have to literally rest before you keep going. So you are like, what's going on? In fact, just recently I had one of my good friends who really loves going to the gym, and he just noticed the things that he would be doing easily. Now he has to, in between sets, he has to rest a little longer, and that was the first clue that let him know that there's a problem. But the other way in which patients like this present, sometimes it is in terms of other peripheral manifestations, meaning because the heart is not supplying excuse me, good blood flow to peripheral, those are tissues, that the legs, the peripheral tissues, then patient starts to have problems. Remember, the heart really is like the engine of the body. If there's a problem with the heart, then you start to have symptoms everywhere else, because the heart is just not supplying sufficient blood to even peripheral tissues. So generally, angina pain or breathlessness, excessive tiredness. Sometimes even adults notice that bluish discoloration because there's some congenital diseases that become worse as someone grows older. So we call these congenital diseases in the adult population. So sometimes you start noticing some bluish discoloration. There's something that we call clubbing of nails, meaning there's a roundness of the nail bed that someone starts to have. All these show that the body, the oxygen levels in the body have generally been low. So those are important.
Sorry for that. When you say a roundness on the nails, what exactly do you mean? What are we looking at?
So there's something called finger clubbing. So literally the tips of the fingers start to look like small clubs.
The fingers, not the nails?
The nails, the part of the fingers that has got the nail bed. So it starts literally to look like a little club.
Okay.
I wish I could have a picture to show that.
But
our viewers can check out finger clubbing. And it's one of the things that shows that for a long time, the body has not been having good oxygen supply to the peripheral tissues. So we call it chronic cyanosis, and it presents with that finger clubbing.
Okay.
Yes.
So those are the early signs. And how long can one go undetected? How long can I go maybe as a person without me experiencing any problems, yet I have a heart condition?
So a lot depends with the nature of heart problem. For example, in the congenital group, there are two major classifications. There's a group that we call cyanotic heart problems, meaning the concentration of oxygen in the blood is going to be very low. So these tend to be picked up earlier. But the other problems that we call acyanotic, meaning the concentration of oxygen in the blood still remains normal, and so this can stay for quite a while. In fact, there are some people that we pick their congenital problems in their 30s, in their 40s. But then there are certain complications that will have been occurring slowly, and by the time we diagnose someone, then even the medication or the surgical treatment or options are limited because it's too late. Yeah, but for the older group of people, usually the older patients, once somebody has coronary artery disease, there are many options when you're talking about how we can manage them treatment-wise.
Yeah, so the way to go is to go for regular checkups.
Exactly.
Even if I'm just doing okay, I should go to hospital and get checked.
Yes, and I know we in Africa generally, because I've worked in Africa and I've worked in a Western country. Our health-seeking behavior is really strange. Sometimes maybe it's fueled by economic factors, but even people who are well-to-do, generally we don't like checkup. There are people who only come to hospital when they are not feeling well. And the problem with that is that the early detection then becomes a mirage. And for many of these heart problems, you can only get cure when the detection is made in good time. So it is really important to have a culture of seeking, not just treatment, but just well-being. How am I doing, doctor? So those annual checkups, the blood parameters that we measure, the blood pressure, the ECG, all those things are really important in detecting these illnesses in good time.
Okay. Can someone with an already existing heart disease, can it be reversed just by food? Is it possible to be reversed by food if they now get into a strict diet and eat properly? Can it be reversed?
So I think what you're referring to probably is more towards the coronary artery disease.
Yeah.
And two things. One, it cannot be reversed by changing diet. But more importantly, progression can be stopped. And that is a good news. You might not be able to change completely in terms of the damage that has already happened, but you prevent it from then progressing to a more advanced stage. So when you're talking about coronary artery disease, there's blockage of the vessels that supply the heart. And that blockage, you usually measure it in terms of percentage. And you start to have symptoms when it's more than 50% blocked. So if you get it early and you change your diet, there are certain medications that are given, you stop smoking, handle the blood pressure properly, then you can prevent progression. So that then you just have checkups now and again to ensure that nothing is progressing. And that prevention of progression is good enough for many people. Once it goes to a certain extent, the blockage goes to a certain extent, then it means the only way to sort that is either the cardiologist putting in a stent in that heart vessel, or we cardiac surgeons coming in and doing a coronary bypass to bypass the place that has a problem. So there is a role for lifestyle change, for prevention generally, but even if you already have the disease, it helps in terms of stopping progression.
All right. You've mentioned smoking as one of the risk factors. Maybe if you can get us through more of these risk factors.
So I'd like to emphasize smoking really, especially because I see a lot of young people beginning to smoke out of, peer pressure. Some
just
people
for the
think,
sake of it.
Yeah, think it's a cool thing.
Yeah.
But smoking is bad. In all ways, it's not just coronary artery disease. There are cancers linked to it. In fact, it's the commonest cause for lung cancer. There are many problems that have to do with smoking. So smoking cessation is really critical. Then management of certain lifestyle diseases. So hypertension A lot of people don't take their blood pressure medications. They've been told they have hypertension, but because you don't feel anything, you just feel, I will not take my meds today. But uncontrolled hypertension is one of the key risk factors for coronary artery disease. Then high cholesterol levels in the body, so we call it hyperlipidemia. So there are a lot of lipids, cholesterols, and the bad type of cholesterols in the body. And there are things you can do to reduce your cholesterols in the body. And then lack of exercise. And these are all controllable issues. You can literally change your lifestyle and start to exercise a little more. What we cannot do anything about is genetic risk. Because we are all born with certain genetics, and you can do nothing about that. But we usually like to say the genetics might load the gun, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger. So you do things, you control the things you can. So you can move more, you can eat better, you can stop smoking, you can control your hypertension, and all this will help reduce the chances of getting coronary artery disease.
So there are heart problems that are hereditary?
Yes. Yeah, so by that we mean there are people that have genetic susceptibility. You just have a higher chance of getting these problems than the general population. So those are factors we can do nothing about. So we for example, know there are certain regions in the world where they have much more coronary artery disease and at a much younger age and a more severe form. That is just genetics. You can do nothing about that. But you can control your lifestyle so that either you delay the coronary artery disease or even prevent it altogether through lifestyle modification.
So is high blood pressure a heart condition? Is it really?
So we don't call it a heart condition, but it is one of the complications that will lead to coronary artery disease. So generally, hypertension as a disease entity in itself does only cause trouble to the heart. So people will get kidney failure because of hypertension. In fact, it's one of the commonest causes of kidney issues. People will get even peripheral vascular issues because of hypertension. People will get stroke in the brain. They get a bleed because of hypertension. So hypertension is a big topic on its own, but it's one of the main problems that leads to coronary artery problems.
Okay. When we talk about a normal pulse rate, what are we talking about?
So we like to say 70, but generally speaking, the pulse rate is affected by many other factors. So children's heart rate is much faster, and that is why for someone who a neonate or a child who's below 1, the targets for heart rate are different than those for an adult. And then for people who are more conditioned, so like athletes, if you were to measure Kipchoge's heart rate, you might find it is in the 40s, and that's normal. My wife is a very passionate fitness guru, and her normal heart rate is usually 40 to 45. That's just like normal resting heart rate. So a lot of it depends with how active generally you are, how fit you are. The more fitter you are, the more efficient your heart is, meaning it doesn't have to pump so fast to get the job done.
So there's no specific pulse rate. It depends with an individual and how maybe fit they are. That's what you're saying?
Exactly. But it's important still to note, heart rates below 40, unless in very highly conditioned athletes, generally heart rates below 40, we'll call that bradycardia or low heart rate, and usually they need to be investigated.
What causes that? Low pulse rate.
So just going back maybe to a little biology for our viewers, the heart has got something that we call a sinoatrial node, or the natural pacemaker. So this is a part of the heart that decides or sets the pace for how frequent the heart will be beating. So it sets the heart rate. So there are certain problems you can have on that particular sinoatrial node that affect the way your heart beats, or there can be a blockage along those pathways. So there's a system we call the conduction pathway of the heart. That is how this sinoatrial node sends its impulses to the beating muscle. So if there are blockages at any level, we call those heart block. So there's type 1 heart block, type 2, type 3, and depending on how bad the heart block is, sometimes we literally have to put in an artificial pacemaker to help the heart beat a little faster. So those are the parameters around heart rate.
And when exactly do you as a cardiologist opt for a pacemaker? Is there a particular stage to it that you decide, okay, this person really needs an artificial pacemaker?
True.
To what extent? To what extent, rather?
So we, for patients who have got 3rd-degree heart block, so the way God made us, we've got 2 chambers on top. We call them the atria, the right and left atrium, and we've got the ventricles at the bottom, the right and left, and they're meant to beat in concert. So why it is important for those to beat in concert is that when the atria empty into the ventricles should be relaxing to receive that, and then the ventricles squeeze. So it's meant to be that normal concert. But you can have points where there is asynchrony. So the way the atria are doing their thing is different from the way the ventricles are doing their thing. So when there's no communication at all, we call that 3rd-degree heart block. And for those, patients need a pacemaker. There are other patients who might have a type of 2nd-degree heart block with very low heart rates, that these also need pacemakers, and usually it's based on the symptoms the patients are having. Literally, there are some people who, on just waking up and walking around, they pass out because the heart is beating too slowly. So again, when patients have those kind of symptoms, we call it syncope, then they need a pacemaker, just an artificial pacemaker that we put in, kind of to set a new pace for the heart.
So a surgery is done and they put it in.
Yeah, it is. It's not a major procedure. There's a way we do it. That is a minor procedure, just under local anesthetic, and then we put in the pacemaker.
Okay, there's someone I know who has a kidney problem. They're undergoing dialysis, and every time they are on the dialysis machine, their heart rate their pulse rate completely goes down under 40, as low as 33. What could be the reason, and would you advise that person to go for a pacemaker? As someone who's on dialysis as well.
So when someone's heart rate goes low, there's something important that we usually do. There's a test we call the ECG. So the ECG is just a tracing. It stands for electrocardiogram, and it's a tracing of the natural electrical current that the heart that is going through the heart. So that ECG tracing usually is the one that helps us know the type of heart block the patient is having. So we can literally be able to look at it and say this is 1st degree, 2nd degree, 3rd degree based on the ECG. So I would say if somebody has those problems, it's important to get that ECG done. Even during the dialysis, it's possible to get a real-time tracing, so that with that, we're able to know, does this person need some kind of intervention or not? There are many other things, like there are things we call electrolytes that can determine how fast the heart is beating, especially in someone who's getting dialysis. So those are other things that are usually checked that are equally important.
Okay. Now, 4 to 5 cardiovascular deaths are due to heart attack and stroke. If we can just get a bit into heart attack, what are the maybe early signs of someone who's about to get a heart attack, if they're there, and what exactly causes a heart attack or stroke? These are 2 different things, right?
Yes.
So if you can just get a bit into that.
So let me first talk about stroke so that we get it out of the way.
Okay.
So when you're talking about cardiovascular disease generally, it includes stroke, which is now vessels in the brain. So cerebral vascular disease is part of the bigger animal that we call cardiovascular disease. And so if somebody gets a bleed in the brain, then they get the manifestations of that is what we call a stroke. And it goes back to the hypertension that we were talking about, because most people get a stroke because of uncontrolled hypertension. I feel this is so critical for the viewers to know. If you've been diagnosed before to have high blood pressure, even if you're feeling okay, it is important to consistently take your pressure medication and to consistently get your blood pressure measured. Because if it goes uncontrolled and you get a stroke, the repercussions are so bad. And I've seen it many, many times. But now, coming back to what classically is called heart attack. When people think of a heart attack, it's that scenario where somebody gets sudden chest pain and they collapse. It's because of an acute, I say acute because someone might have been having a coronary artery problem for a long time, But a scenario can occur where there is an acute blockage and there's very little or no blood flow that goes to certain muscles of the heart. And those muscles of the heart can actually die. We call that a myocardial infarction. So when someone is having that syndrome, the first thing that people see, people generally call it heart attack, in quotes, but that just means there is a section of heart muscle that acutely is not getting blood supply. So it presents with pain, and the worst bit is somebody can actually get terrible heart failure because of that, and that muscle might never recover, and that is how people die because of coronary artery disease. Two quick things I'd like to mention here. If we as the public learn how to recognize some of these symptoms early, it is possible to save some lives. Because somebody might collapse at home, they're clutching on their chest, they're saying they're feeling this pain. It is important that those people are rushed to a facility that is equipped with both personnel and equipment to sort heart problems. Because we've had even prominent people in our country dying because of coronary artery disease, because it's not recognized early, and people are taken round in circles before being taken to a proper facility that has the ability to take care of these people. Healthcare in our country, there are certain levels. We have level 5 and level 6 facilities. These are the facilities that have got the cardiologists, they've got cardiac surgeons, and they've got equipment that can be able to help people like those. So if you take this person to a level 1 or level 2, we'll have wasted opportunity for intervention. And that is why it is critical to know that. The last thing that I'd mention that I think is something of national importance, we have very few facilities in Kenya that can actually deal with these cardiac emergencies. Very few. As I speak to you, for example, we have practicing cardiothoracic surgeons in this country are about 16. 16.
16
Literally,
only?
16.
The entire country?
We have got a population of 55 million people. So you're talking of about one cardiac surgeon for a million people.
Where are we going wrong?
So
is it that
not a million, actually for 5 million when you think about it.
Is it that we're not having people who go for these courses, or they're there but where are we going wrong?
So there are a number of aspects to it. The first one is a lot of the bright young Kenyans, doctors in this country, they really want to serve this nation, but they are frustrated in this country. There are no employment opportunities. They go elsewhere. Before this year, last year, I was working in Australia in a cardiac unit. The pay is better. The work environment is better. You're really appreciated as a professional. When you come back home, professionals are just not treated right. The investment in healthcare, literally, if you suddenly have a heart attack in Lodwar today, or you have a heart attack, even if you're a prominent person, you've gone to visit your constituents in Wajir right now and you have a problem, and you've got probably an hour or so opportunity for intervention to be done, you will not get it. Apart from Nairobi, Mombasa, Eldoret, Kisumu, Nakuru, there are no other places that have got the full complement of cardiologists and cardiac surgeons that will be able to help the people. So I think investment in health in this area is really, really critical.
That's really sad to know. And the amount of brain drain, especially in the medical field, is immense. You know, I know more than 5 people who studied medicine here, but they're working abroad. What should the government maybe do, according to you? What can be done to reverse this?
That's one of the pains of my life, because I made a very tough decision when I was thinking of coming back home. And I talked to many of my colleagues, and everyone was wondering, why are you going back? Yet if you think about it, if we don't serve our people, then who will do it? At some point, we have to make that decision to serve our own. We as Africans have to sort Africa's problems. But specifically to your question, the investment in healthcare that the government needs to make is known. It's not reinventing the wheel. It is known. There was the Abuja Declaration where certain percentage of national budget was meant to go to health. That is known. If you go to the Ministry of Health right now, in their shelves, they have got a lot of policy documents that are really good, but they've never been implemented. We are doing things in a very uncoordinated fashion. Every county wants to have a referral institution that is not at all related to the facilities around. So we're thinking, can't we have region, maybe centers of excellence that are regional? So that we say, if you have a kidney problem, in Kenya we know this is the place you go to. If you have a heart problem, this is where you go to. But everybody is doing their things uncoordinated. Then lastly, these young doctors who are coming out of our facilities and are staying unemployed, and it's a great pain. They want to serve Kenyans, but they're staying unemployed. After a few years, when they get opportunities to go, you can be sure they'll never want to come back. That's so I think investment not only in buildings, but investment in people, because at the end of the day, it is people that get the job done.
Yeah, it's really a sad state. And you mentioned that there are places, if someone gets a particular heart condition, probably a heart attack, they may not be able to get help at all in time. So is there any maybe first aid that one can, if there's someone in the house with them, is there something that one can do before one gets to the proper facility?
Yes, so generally speaking, there is what we call first responders, or the first people that get to someone if someone has collapsed. There's a certain protocol that the general public, it's good for them to know. So in many countries, the general public is trained in what you do as a first responder. So this, what we call first aid, the general public knows. In fact, there was a patient I remember who collapsed in a train station, and within 1 hour was on my theater table. The members of the public are the ones who did what we call the CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, members of the public. So it is beyond the scope of this interview to explain how all that is done. But now we have agencies in this country, St. John's are doing it, Kenya Red Cross are doing it, so that it's good for members of the public to be trained on how to do basic resuscitation in case somebody collapses. It might be because of a cardiac thing, it can be because of a brain thing, but it's important for them to know that generally. But beyond that, I think it is important for us as a country to invest in a number of facilities that are distributed across the country that can then meet this critical need. After somebody is brought in as a casualty, how then are we able to sort them beyond that? And that is where the big failure is in our system.
Okay, let's get into the treatment options now, the solutions to all of this. What are the treatment options available to the various cardiovascular problems that you've just talked about?
Again, it goes back to the specific problem that we are referring to. There, in the congenital group, there are some of these that some medications can be given and the child is allowed to grow, and some of these, especially, quote unquote, holes in the heart, there are some that can close on their own over a period of time. So there are some medications that are given and then the child is followed and observed, and there are a few of those that close over time. So then there are medications that deal with the heart failure. So somebody might be having a congenital problem and has heart failure, so medications to handle the heart failure. But the structural problems that these patients have can only be sorted by surgery. And that is the big elephant in the room, because one cardiac operation, the cheapest you'd find anywhere in the world, costs at least 500,000 shillings. Anywhere in the world. The cheapest you can find, anywhere in the world. So you have a lot of these congenital problems that occur in the poorer populations. And then they're the ones expected to be able to foot these bills. So a bill of $1 million, $1.5 million, to get a hole in the heart closed. A lot of people just cannot afford that. And yet, structural problems can only be handled that way. The cardiologists have got some, what we call minimal invasive techniques that they can use, like through the blood vessels to close some of the holes. But again, the issue is cost. When it comes to the to the older population. So rheumatic heart disease, again, surgery, open heart surgery. And in this country, I work in Tenwek Hospital. It's the place that does the highest number of open heart operations in the country. It's a mission hospital. It does more than our national hospital, which to me doesn't make sense. We must invest in our national facilities, in building capacity to be able to help the people at need. Because rheumatic heart disease, a lot of it, again, requires open heart surgery. Coronary artery disease, the same. It's either the cardiologist putting in a stent, or we people coming in and doing what we call coronary bypass surgery, which do cost. And so investment in health, we've been talking to NHIF. NHIF covers 450,000 shillings for every open heart operation.
Okay.
So if a patient needs to pay, for example, 1.5, is a poor patient, they've been paying their NHIF faithfully, but NHIF only covers about a third at most of the cost. So then what happens? I lastly say this because this is very emotive for me. I have a list of patients who are waiting surgery, and when a patient dies on my waiting list, they color code it red because they have died waiting for surgery. They don't have the money to get the surgery done. So every time I look at that list and I see more and more and more reds, because the patients can't afford. For me, it's very depressing. It's very depressing, given that the reason I came back to this country, I felt that probably many of us can join together and make a difference in our patients' lives. And when there's surgical correction that can literally save the patient's life, it can literally cure the disease. And the only reason somebody is dying is because they cannot afford. That is gut-wrenching for a doctor.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
So the only treatment option is open heart surgery for most of them?
For many of them, it is. So if somebody has a structural problem, like when you talk of rheumatic heart disease, there are valves in the heart that are usually affected. So you might find this valve becomes very tight, so blood is not flowing through properly. Unless you treat that surgically, either repair the valve or replace it, you'll never be able to help the patient. They can be given medications over time, but the structural problem remains. And then the heart gets weaker and weaker, and the patient dies on. Cardiologists, there are certain interventions they can do, like they're what we call balloon valvuloplasty, so it can help some of the valve problems. But again, it goes back to the cost. But ultimately, for many of our patients with congenital problems, if somebody has a hole in the heart, it needs to be closed up. If somebody's valve is either leaky or too tight, it needs to be repaired or replaced. If somebody has a coronary artery problem, they either need a stent or they need bypass. And all these are open heart procedures that cost a lot of money.
I get that. Now, for someone who's looking after a patient with cardiovascular, some of these cardiovascular diseases that you've just mentioned, do you have maybe a word of advice to them? Is there something that you would want to say to them?
Two things. The first is I want us to make some noise because unfortunately in our country, if we don't make enough noise, the policy makers or the people that hold the coffers are not moved. So the people that have patients back at home, make some noise, talk to your leaders, your MCAs, visit their offices, knock in the office of your governor, let them know that this is a problem. Because a lot of Kenyans, if I ask them when they heard about rheumatic heart disease, many have not even heard about that. Yet I can tell you, every day there are Kenyans dying of rheumatic heart disease. I have a list of thousands of patients waiting for surgery, specifically for rheumatic heart disease. So please, let's make noise. Let us engage the powers that be so that people understand that this is a problem that needs political, economic intervention. But secondly, I want you to know there are many other people who are faced with problems like this, and we have organizations in this country that seek to help people like this. We have the Kenya Cardiac Society that is doing a fantastic job in engaging both government and in helping patients, in engaging industry, pharmaceuticals, to make things, drugs cheaper. Then we've got many other agencies. We've got like the Matter Heart Foundation that is helping a lot of kids at need. We just started what we call the Maseki Heart Foundation, named after the young man that died and inspired me to get into medicine. So there are all these foundations that seek to help. So you're not alone. If you seek help, you definitely find help. But lastly, when you have some symptoms, or when you notice some of these things at home, a child just getting tired, squatting, just doesn't seem to keep up with the rest, please let these children be checked up. Because if you can have earlier diagnosis, our chances of cure are much higher than when you have late diagnosis.
All right. How do we spread awareness to this? You know, something like what you've just mentioned, like a child who's squatting as much. I'm sure that many people didn't know about that, you know, on what to eat, what not to eat. How do we make sure that we're spreading enough awareness, and maybe who is responsible to do that?
So the Ministry of Health in 2018 came up with a policy document. They called it the Cardiovascular Diseases Guidelines. So this is a policy document that is really informing to the level of the community health worker some of the things they need to be doing in the community in terms of awareness, letting people know. For example, now the community health workers are going in people's homes. They're doing blood pressure checks, ensuring that people are taking their medications. So I think from at a policy level, there's a document that is helping push for that. However, I feel at individual level, as citizens of this country, we need to take this responsibility at a personal, individual level to supplement the efforts that the ministry is making. And so many of you who are listening to this, you know people in your environment who have symptoms of this nature. Let us help one another. Let's educate one another so that together we can have a healthy country.
All right, and as we wind up on this particular discussion, the theme for this year's World Heart Day, which was celebrated last month on the 29th, was Use Heart, No Heart. Could you get us a bit into that?
Yes. So we did a celebration of the World Heart Day, and the idea really is to involve people to move more, because we've realized a lot of the problems that we are currently having is out of sedentary lifestyles. We actually now say that sitting is a new smoking, meaning the impact of smoking on health is now comparable to the impact of sitting on health.
Wow.
And so we want people to use their hearts more, meaning move more, really be thoughtful about your level of activity. Many of especially in this city of Nairobi, people have these little devices that you put on your wrist, the smart watches. You can literally be able to know the number of steps you've taken in a day. And so there is a way you can say, have I moved as much as I should? 10,000 steps, we've said that is a good starting point. So it's possible to actually measure. There are metrics. So every 30 minutes, like for you guys who do work that involves a lot of sitting, every 30 minutes, break your sitting. You can do lots of, if you need something in a different office, walk to that office instead of calling. So there are practical ways. If instead of using the lift, just walk up. So that level of intentionality, when we have it, you can actually start to move more, use your heart more, and that way you have a healthier heart.
Thank you so much. This was so insightful. I have personally learned so much on heart diseases, and I believe that our viewers at home have also got to learn a thing or two from this. If I may allow you to give your parting shot as we wind up.
Sure. The last thing that I'd like to say to our viewers, we can actually change the story of heart disease in this country together. I'm really convinced that if we work together as a unit, we can make a big difference. Those of you who have ability, you do the Matter Heart Run, contribute. Those of you with a bit of knowledge, engage the people around you. But most importantly, those of you who are in positions of power, our governors, why don't we invest in healthcare? The Ministry of Health, the public officials, why can't we change the story so that Kenya becomes a model for the countries around of what is possible when people come together to sort out heart disease?
Oh, I got that. Thank you. Thank you so much to each and every one of you who has been tuned in on the show. This is where we end Good Morning Kenya. Do enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. We'll meet again tomorrow, same time and place, God willing. I have been your host, Bibi Ndagwa. Goodbye.
Wait, I can explain.
My shoulder, it was nearly dislocated.
I came here as fast as I could. You guys were in the north while I was in the south. Hey, I thought you guys were with a client.
I'm sorry, but I've decided that I'm not gonna do it.
To be honest, when it all happened, I was really terrified. But once you three arrived, I felt safe again. I was so fixated on the idea that this place would make me secure. But I just realized that if I sign this document, it might make things worse.
Are you insane, Olga? What are you playing at? You haven't interested me in a long time.
Ask your husband where he was this morning. I'm not crazy! I demand that you release me! Can't you understand?
What I have to tell you goes beyond just my feelings. It's something that I should have told you a long time ago. You have no idea how I regret not telling you before. Anibal and Olga were indeed lovers. He's the one who's lying, not her.
How long have you known this?
I found out soon after you both arrived in San Juan.
My name is Mary Modoni. I am the Principal Secretary for Public Health and Professional Standards. The government is committed to deliver universal health coverage through primary health care network, with a focus on preventive and promotive health. To achieve this, several systems have been put in place. We have conducted assessment of over 14,000 health facilities to establish the level of service in terms of human resources for health, equipment in our hospitals, and technology. In addition, we are finalizing the process of establishing 315 primary care networks in all the 47 counties to support the referral system through the 100,000 trained and equipped community health promoters. These community health promoters will be key in health promotion and facilitating early detection of diseases at household levels in the spirit of the Afya Bora Mashinani goal. The government has established systems to prevent spread of diseases, and we have an elaborate surveillance system to mitigate cross-border spread of diseases. We are also deploying vaccines as a preventive measure to immunizable diseases. We will continue to educate and inform Kenyans so that they are empowered to live a healthy lifestyle. I now ask Kenyans to practice high levels of hygiene in their environment. Remember to wash your hands, drink clean and safe water, and proper waste disposal. We endeavor to ensure available, affordable, acceptable, and accessible quality healthcare. For a healthy nation, let us adopt a balanced diet, and our health is our responsibility. Afya yako, jukumu lako. Afya nyumbani.
We traveled to Kigali to visit designer Matthew Rugamba to see what he is all about.
One of the things I'm trying to do right now is to create the dress code for the modern African man.
Matthew Rugamba has changed how many men view fashion in Rwanda. The classic clothing silhouettes that he creates simultaneously reflect on the past and shape the present in fashion.
When I started, the idea was to create